So now we are continuing, and I'm going to grab my little stool here. We're continuing our series in the book of James. And last week we talked about the first chapter of, you need to not just listen to the word, but you need to put it into action. And if you lack wisdom, you're supposed to act for it, ask for it. And God will give you the wisdom that you're asking for. And today we're going to dive into a couple more topics. So we're diving into chapter 2. Now, I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but last week I gave you a challenge. Read the book of James each week. It's got 5 chapters, so if you do a chapter a day, you still have some margin where you can watch the Hawkeyes play football if you want to continue doing that after yesterday's game. I can say that because Penn State didn't play yesterday. So we couldn't lose, but we also couldn't win. But just want to encourage you, as we go through this series, keep reading through the book of James. Keep reading through the book of James, because some things will come back and you'll be like, oh yeah, we talked about that and we talked about this. So encourage you to do that. But today we're going to be talking about James chapter 2. And we're continuing our spiritual training. This is all, as I said, James is kind of, hey, this is ideas on helping us grow in our relationship with God and in our faith. And so as we go into the book of James, the second chapter, there's a couple things that we need to kind of put as the backdrop. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is mercy over judgment. And so that's the first section of chapter 2, the first 14 verses or so. But before we dive into it, I want to give you a little bit of background. So James, again, believed to be written by the half-brother of Jesus. So someone who knew Jesus pretty well. James was also written about 30-ish years after Jesus, his ministry, his death and resurrection and ascension to heaven. So it's not like Jesus was around and then 200 years later James wrote this book. No, it was pretty recent history that James actually was written. Now, this second chapter, especially the first part, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. One, it's the backdrop of James really, you're going to hear and be able to see, if you know the Beatitudes, some of the influence of the Beatitudes coming through this first part. And we're going to read through the Beatitudes here in just a second before we get into the actual James section. But the other part that you need to understand is James is writing this letter to the church in Jerusalem and all over. But he's the pastor of the church in Jerusalem, which is kind of the first Christian church. Okay? So keep that in mind. Like before Jesus, there wasn't the Christian church, because Christians is Christ's followers, right? You had God's followers and the children of Israel, but they were then, the Jewish people were celebrating in the tabernacle and living the Jewish law. Well, now Jesus came and he changed everything, and now James is in charge of the first, which would be Jewish people who converted to Christianity or who are starting this new faith, this new religion. And so this book is written with that kind of backdrop. And these people would totally understand the Jewish culture that James is writing from as well. You know, when you write something, you kind of have your natural thoughts and ideas in your culture in mind. And if you're writing to a certain crowd, you kind of use vocabulary that you know the group's going to figure out and understand without you having to explain it. And so that's kind of how James writes this. Let me give you an example. If I'm writing a paper or a letter, and I'm writing to a bunch of wrestlers, and I talk about this person needs to shoot more often. Now, to a wrestler, we know exactly what that means. They need to try to go in and get a takedown, right? That's a shot. When you shoot, you're going in after the person's legs, you're trying to get a takedown. So that means one thing. Now, if I'm writing to a bunch of basketball players and I say this person needs to shoot more often, I don't explain that I mean they need to try to make a basket more often. You shoot the ball, right? Basketball players understand when I use the word shoot what I mean. Wrestlers understand when I say the word shoot, they know what I mean. If I'm talking to a bunch of archers and I say shoot, they know what I mean. Draw the bow, release the bow, right? So in writing, James doesn't stop and say, oh, hang on. A couple thousand years from now, there's going to be people reading this that might not understand kind of where I'm coming from. So let me give you some background. James, in this first part, is actually kind of giving an explanation of a trial that is taking place. Okay, so it's almost like he's describing a courtroom. And in the Jewish culture then, there were definite rules that took place in the courtroom. And some of those rules would be, one, when you went to court, whether you're the plaintiff or the defendant, you stand during the case. You stand before the judge. You stand there. Now, if for some reason someone does need to sit, then the judge can go ahead and say, yeah, you can have a seat. But if one person gets a seat, the other person is required to be offered a seat as well. Okay? Now, another interesting thing is if there is a trial and it's a rich person versus a poor person, there was an obligation of the rich person to do one of two things. Either dress down to the same as what the poorer person would be dressed as, or the rich person could give clothing to the poorer person so that they looked rich as well. The idea being that when they come in, they are to be viewed as complete, total equals to the judge. That he shouldn't be able to one or the other and go, okay, you're rich, you're poor. He should look at both and go, oh, you are on the same level. Also, a judge was not supposed to, if he knew them, look at one and go, I know you, and you're a pretty upright person. You know, you don't cause any problems. You're a pretty good person. I know you've got a reputation of definitely being someone who might need to come to court. The judge was supposed to actually look at both people and consciously look at them and go, they are both lawbreakers. Both of them are lawbreakers, and both of them have the potential to lie to win their case. Now, James doesn't explain any of that while he's writing this, but as we go through this, you're going to see why it's important to kind of have that backdrop, okay? So it's a court case, and you got the Beatitudes. So let's dive in with the Beatitudes. I want to share these with you. Found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Some of you may be very familiar with these. Again, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. I'm going to repeat that one too. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And finally, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. And he's talking to Jesus. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So keep that background in mind, and keep the courtroom ideas that I just shared with you in mind as we read through this next part of James. My brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, you must not show favoritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, you must stand there or sit on the floor by my feet. Sound familiar? Isn't that interesting? Have you not discriminated amongst yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Now, if we didn't have the whole courtroom backdrop to read this passage of Scripture by, we would miss a lot of what James is saying. We could easily just go through and go, oh, you know what? He's talking about if someone comes into church and we're just fawning all over the rich person and things like that. But he's using very specific language. I mean, even saying, here's a good seat for you, but to the poor man, you stand there. Totally contradicting what is allowed in that courtroom. And then he comes down to the bottom. Have you not discriminated amongst yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? All of a sudden, now this becomes a little bit more powerful. Let's continue. Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and inherit the kingdom he promised those who loved him? All of a sudden, now the Beatitudes are starting to pour in. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they will inherit the kingdom. But you have dishonored the poor. Rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? There again, he's talking about this court case, giving that visual. Are they not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name to whom you belong? And we'll get into that more when we get into chapter 5. If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the laws as lawbreakers. Again, here it is. Courtroom setting, lawbreakers, both are supposed to be seen as potential lawbreakers that are willing to lie to win their case. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. If you do not commit adultery, but you commit murder, you have become lawbreakers. In other words, just as that judge is supposed to look at both people and go, you're both lawbreakers, I need to think of you as both lawbreakers, because they knew all it took is one infraction of breaking the law. That makes you a lawbreaker. Now, Christians, I don't know why sometimes we can think, oh, I'm not that bad because I don't break the law, or I don't sin all that often, or the sins that I commit, they're not really that bad, right? But James is very clear. If you break one part of the law, you've broken it all. Now, picture this. Say you're downhill skiing, okay? And you're skiing down, and all of a sudden, your skis get tangled up. You go to fall, and since your skis are tangled up, you feel this very, very sharp pain in your shin area, and it's hard to walk. And you finally get down the hill, you finally get to a doctor, they take some x-rays. And imagine if the doctor came into your room and said, you're good to go. Your leg is 99% not broken. You would look at him and go, no, that means my leg is broken, right? No. No, see, you only broke it 1%, just this one spot right here. Broke it clean through, yeah, granted, but it's just this one little spot that's broken, so we're considering it not broken because it's 99% not broken. Like, you didn't shatter the whole thing. It's not like, bones, pieces everywhere. It's just this one small little break that goes clean through right in the middle, but you'll be fine because you're 99% not broken. You're going to look at them and go, you're a quack. I'm going to go somewhere else. Now, when it comes to broken bones, we understand If you break one part, it's all broken. But when it comes to God's law, all of a sudden, we turn into quacks. And we say, oh, no. I didn't break it all. I just broke this one little part right here. But it's really the same as that bone. And so James is reminding them, look, if you break one part of it, you've broken all of it. Now here's where I want to rest for a little bit. Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom. Because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom. Let's go back to the courtroom for a moment. And just picture we're all there, and we're watching case after case. And we're there not just as observers, but we're there because our case is coming up eventually. If you knew you were about to face the same judge as everyone else before you, are you sitting there like saying, throw the book at him, give him what he deserves? Oh, yeah, that guy, oh, for sure guilty. Just cheering and telling the judge, maximum sentence, all this wonderful stuff. If you know you're coming up eventually, I think you'd probably be priming the pump, if you could, and being like, oh, mercy. Show mercy. Oh, I know that. Seriously, this person needs some grace in his life. Oh, this person, she definitely mercy judge, for sure. Oh, you are such a merciful, wonderful judge. Show some mercy, because you're thinking by the time you get up there, hopefully he's just like on a roll and be like, mercy, here we go, yay, right? You don't want him on a roll going, this has been fun, guilty, boom, next, right? So speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom. In our lives, we need to speak and act as though our case is on the docket. And we're just moving up the line. And so when we're interacting with other people in our lives, instead of being judgmental, instead of looking at them and going, oh, wow, you are messed up. You are a sinner. Wow, you deserve some judgment, and we start judging people instead of realizing that we're just as broken, because a broken bone is a broken bone. We're on the same level. We need to be looking at other people and going, I'm going to extend you some mercy. Because if we are Christ followers, we've already kind of gotten the plea deal, so to speak. Jesus has said, you know what? I'll take them. Their sin, count it towards me. I'm giving them. See, we've been shown so much mercy, so much grace, that it should just spill out onto those around us. And so we need to speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law. Not speak and act as if we're above and beyond the law, as if we're perfect and we're high and mighty. But we need to speak and act and realize and go, you know what? I am on the exact same level as you are. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to criticize you. I'm not going to tell you how awful you are. I'm going to tell you, I need your mercy. I need mercy and grace just as much as you. We are in the same boat together. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy triumphs over judgment. I think one of the things that has made the church, how do I want to say this nicely? A place to avoid is because the church sometimes acts as if judgment triumphs over mercy. We act as if it's our job to be the judge of everyone else. We don't realize we're not the judge. We're on the docket. And so as Christians, it is not our job to convict someone of their sin. That's God's job. Now, God could use us. I'm not saying that we just tell people, oh, what you're doing is fine and dandy if it is totally contrary to God's will in their life. But it's not our job to shame and ridicule. It's our job to show mercy, to lovingly. I'll tell you what, you approach someone lovingly and say, man, this just isn't what God desires for your life. This is not God's plan or His will for your life. Man, I would love to help you in this area. Then to go up to someone and say, you are totally wrong. You are a sinner bound for hell. Total difference. But sometimes we're so worried about correcting other people's behavior that we lose sight that we're not doing what God has called us to do, and that's to love our neighbor as ourselves. Mercy triumphs over judgment, which is going to take us to the next part of James. Faith responds with deeds. Now, before we dive in here, I am not saying that we're saved through works. I'm not saying we're saved by our actions. But what I am going to be saying in this next phase, which James, I think, says very clearly, is that if we have a strong, true faith, it's going to spur on some actions in our life. Right? So let's move on. So James chapter 2, verses 14 through 17 says this. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If any of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by actions, is dead. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by actions, is dead. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? So if you're not familiar with that passage of Scripture, so Abraham is promised that his descendants will outnumber the stars, and he has this son, and then he's told you need to sacrifice your son, and Abraham actually is following through, being obedient, going, okay, I'm going to trust God. That something miraculous is going to happen, and God does stop him from sacrificing his son, and moving on, children of Israel, yay, go, team. All right, so you see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. It is, if you truly understand your sinful state and how much you need forgiveness and God's mercy and God's grace in your life, if you truly understand that, and you cross that line of faith and accept the mercy and grace and forgiveness that God freely offers you, when that happens, there should be some kind of response. If there's not a response, then there seems to be some kind of disconnect. That either you don't truly understand how much mercy was shown, or something just didn't click. My daughters have been, for quite a while now, asking for a dog. Now, when years back, we had great excuses. Well, we rent, and the rental doesn't allow dogs, just cats, and that's why we have a cat who lived for 19 years. Wow. And then it was, well, when we buy a house, maybe. Well, then we bought a house, and they're like, we bought a house, let's get a dog. And we're like, well, we need a fenced-in backyard, because, where we live now, well, where we lived then when we owned the house, it was just kind of open. The dog could have ran for forever. Who knows where that dog would have ended up. So now the house that we're buying here, guess what it has? It has a fenced-in backyard. And our youngest had quite the campaign of every day, we should get a dog. We should get a dog. Now, technically, the fencing is like all of our neighbors' fences. And there's this one corner where they don't really meet. So, the dog could sneak through, right? Now, so the girls have been begging for a dog. Now, imagine if one day they came home from school and there in the living room was this cute, adorable puppy, just wiggling like crazy, just, that puppy smile that they can tend to have. Imagine they come home from school, they see that puppy and go, huh, and just walk off. Now, would that be the normal reaction of the girls who have been begging for a dog for quite a while? No. Why? Because they're like, oh, we want a dog, we want a dog, we want a dog. We got a dog, right? That should be like tears. Oh, puppy, right? And the puppy's licking them, and they're just crying and laughing at the same. That you would think that would be the response. Okay, so much bigger than a dog is receiving the gift of salvation. If we really knew our sinful state and where we were really headed without God's love and grace and mercy. And like I said, then we cross that line of faith. There should be some kind of response. And James is saying, your faith is made complete through your deeds. Now, not necessarily, hey, these are the good things you need to do. But there should be some kind of response in your life. There should be some kind of thankfulness that you just, God, thank you so much. What can I do? There should be some kind of happening that takes place. We'll continue on with James. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous? Think about that for a second. Never thought you'd see those words next to each other, would you? Rahab the prostitute considered righteous. Okay, I want that to sink in a little bit. Was not Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. So let's talk about Rahab a little bit. Spies into the city. Children, the Israelite spies came into this. Check it out. They found out that they were there. Rahab made a huge decision that day. Either stick with her people and turn in the spies and continue life as she knew it, or look at the spies, think about the God that they served, and say, I'm with you. I'm with him. I'm with your God. See, now, we like to make it all nice and neat and clean. Sometimes we're like, okay, if you want to become a Christian, pray this prayer, right? Have you ever heard those words? And sometimes it's like this prayer, like this is it. If you miss a word, not good, right? It's like you pray this prayer. Well, God is like, no, you don't have to pray that prayer, but you have to make a commitment. There has to be a heart transformation. Rahab had a heart transformation that day. She said, I no longer want to live the life that I was living. I want to live for God, and I'm on his side now. And so she allows the spies to escape. And it says that her faith that day, let me go back, gave lodging to the spies and sent them off on a different direction. She was considered righteous because she had a faith moment and she put it into action. So faith without deeds is dead. If you have had a faith moment, but there has been no actions in your life that point back to that, how alive can that faith truly be? If I bring a puppy home to my daughters and they go, huh, to me it would say all of that talk, all of the begging was pointless, was false, wasn't real. Because if it was real, if you really desired the puppy that much, there would have been a different response. If you really have faith, if you really understand where you came from, if you really understand what God has done for you, there would be something stirring in your heart that says, I need to extend mercy and grace to other people. I am not going to judge others the way that I used to. I am not going to see people the way I used to. I'm going to start loving my neighbor as myself. I'm going to strive to love God with all my heart, soul, and mind. There is going to be something different about us as Christ followers. If there is nothing different between us and the rest of the world, something is wrong. Something is wrong. But here's the problem that I'm seeing, not here at Hillside specifically, but with the church today. Sometimes there is a big difference between the church and the world. And sometimes the difference is the church is grumpier, the church is meaner, the church is more judgmental, the church is angrier than the rest of the world. If someone for Christmas bought me a lotto ticket and I won $450 million with that ticket. Now, let's not get into, oh, Dave, you shouldn't play the lotto, blah, blah. We're not getting into that right now, okay? If all of a sudden I won $450 million, I'd be like, whoa, okay, life change. Things are going to be different at the Ovell household. Girls might actually get a dog, right? Because we can buy the dog a house of its own somewhere. And so what God has done for us is worth way more than $450 million. What God has done for us is worth way more than your favorite sports team winning a championship. What God has done for us is way more than getting a pay raise or getting a promotion or a new job. All these things that we celebrate and think are so great, what God has done for us is so much greater than that. So now let's go back to the beginning of James chapter 2. Where he says, look, we're supposed to speak and act as if we're on the docket, as if we're going to be getting judged here soon. That does two things. It reminds us that we're sinful, and it reminds us we are the judge. 2, our faith should be alive and active, meaning, like James says, if you're living out the law, love your neighbor as yourself, and love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. There should be a difference in our life. So my challenge and my question to us this week is this. Have we been putting ourselves in judgment? Judge? Have we been claiming to be the judge, forgetting that we're actually on the docket? And has our faith had actions with it? See, if we want to grow in our faith, there needs to be some actions. There needs to be some impact that, because of what God has done for me, there's this outward response. There is this overflowing of God's mercy and grace. I can't imagine what it would be like if everyone's conversion to Christianity looked like this, where Jesus was seriously sitting as judge in a courtroom. And one day you walk in and Jesus says, you have a decision to make. Here are all your crimes. And he just lists them on a screen. And your penalty for this is the eternal separation from God. No hope, no joy, no love, no peace. You can choose to continue down the path. Or I can forgive you of all of this. And you can have eternal peace, joy, hope, love. Spend eternity with me and my Father. If it was that physical, I think even the toughest of people, when given that forgiveness, would begin to weep. If it was that real and physical and tangible for us to see. But folks, that is the reality. And I think we need to, in not a beating ourselves up kind of way, but we need to be reminded on a regular basis, man, I've been forgiven much. God has forgiven a lot. God has provided much more than I deserve. And we got to stop going, I'm not that bad. I'm really not a sinner. I'm 99% good. And understand what God has given us. If we truly can understand that, folks, I think we would truly weep, and we would want to share that with others, and we would want to share that grace and mercy with others as well. Let's go ahead and pray. God, again, we thank you for today. And God, we thank you for what you've done for us. And God, we just pray now that you would help us. God, help us to have action with our faith. That it could be made complete. God, help us. Give us the wisdom. You said if we ask for wisdom, you would give it to us. Give us the wisdom on how to love our neighbor as ourselves. God, give us wisdom on how to love you with all our heart, soul, and mind. Give us wisdom on areas that we need to work on in our lives. God, help us to show mercy and grace and love to those around us instead of being judges towards them. And God, let us live for you in the joy and the peace that your forgiveness offers. In your name we pray. Amen.